Welcome to our Waldner Academy, and thanks a lot for joining us. We have a great topic today. It's about incubators and accelerators, the most important success factors. My name is Alexander Biller, and I'm looking forward to share a lot of inspiration with you. We have great speakers. Impulse number one is Dr. Jan Borkowski. He's site director from the Life Science Factory in Göttingen, Germany. And he will talk about what are the key success factors for life science incubation. Impulse number two is Jerome Lutz, founder and visionary lead of Smart Lab Architects. He will answer the question, why do we need so many more incubators now? And impulse three, we have a triple speaker round with my colleague Max English and me, and also Neve Madden. She's general manager from the brand new life science incubator in Singapore. We will talk about how can we start into an unknown future. At the end, we have a small or short Q&A session. So if you have questions, write it in the chat, and after that we can discuss and answer your questions. So thanks a lot for joining us. I hope everybody has a good cup of coffee in his hand, and then I would say, let's start. Jan, I will hand over to you.
Excellent, great, Alex. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to share a bit about what we learned when we looked at what actually makes a life science incubator successful, and how we try to put that into action. So I'm going to share my slides. Perfect. Yeah. So as I said, we are, I'm site director with the Life Science Factory, and what we are just about to start a life science incubator in Göttingen, heart of Germany. And what we want to do is create rooms for ideas and perspectives for founders in the life sciences, so they can thrive. And to start with, we had a look at Göttingen. In the heart of Germany, classic university town, 30,000 students, 4 universities, 6,000 researchers here, and various disciplines, but there's an outstanding life science expertise here. We've got a load of research centers and institutes amongst those universities, 5 Max Planck institutes there, the German Primate Center, and a few other places. We have some science-based industry and also some successful life science founders here in Göttingen, some Nobel laureates among them. So if you look at the science and the research, this is a great place, and there's excellent quality there. But then if you look at startups and at spin-offs, it looks quite different actually. And we were wondering, why is that so? Why aren't there that many startups and spin-offs actually that translate that excellent research into action and into a business application, if you like? And some would say, well, the mindset is missing, and maybe those guys there in the middle of Germany, they're just not entrepreneurial enough to go. Well, we would say mindset actually follows skill set, and so it's a question of entrepreneurial skills, entrepreneurial experience, but also it's a question of the environment. Is the environment supportive enough? So we looked at great ecosystems in the life sciences in Tel Aviv, in Boston, in Shanghai. We looked what's there in Göttingen, and we were able to distill what we would think is the 6 key success factors to do a successful life science incubator. Something from a point of view of an ecosystem provider or incubator there. That's actually necessary for startups to thrive. And I'm happy to share them with you a bit, and then how we try to put them into action. So the first is you need to provide access to world-class IP for your startups, and basically have an easy to understand, standardized process to get this IP. And that's what is a good approach for that is that you have founder and investor friendly standard conditions or corridor of contract conditions like the MIT has or Stanford has. And then also you need to provide good licensing conditions, low fees, backload agreements for the startups or for the founders to be, and then support them all the way through with IP consulting, with helping them with a patent strategy and so on, so they can actually use the IP to the best of their possibilities. Second success factor is provide an entrepreneurial mindset and entrepreneurial know-how. So. And that actually starts very early on in uni with entrepreneurship education programs, goes on with mentorships, so that you have experienced experts that actually mentor teams or mentor founders. Showcase events where you share success stories, where you have current startups exchanging between each other. We have a format we call the Life Science Startup Day, where we have that at least once a year, offer this platform for that. And it goes on up to really the universities and the research institutions, that the scientists there get some hours that they can dedicate to their own projects, to their business ideas, basically to get things going and started. Third success factor is access to flexible infrastructure, and that in life sciences means more than anything access to flexible lab infrastructure. So really rent your bench as you need it, by months, scale it up, scale it down, and have access to fully equipped labs, so that you can do what you need and want to do, and that you have a facility that allows you to grow as your project grows and as your ideas grow. You also need to provide founder-friendly access to specialized high-end equipment in the universities, in the research institutions, in the hospitals around where you are, and also service units in the universities, like a biobank or things like that. Fourth success factor is network of experts and business talents and experienced founders. So have this network ready, basically on tap, for your startups, for the people that you want to help, and then use classic networking formats from the after work or maybe a fireside chat. Install a community platform for additional digital networking opportunities, social media style thing there, and then provide access to topic experts on different topics, life science specific, regulatory topic, technical topics, but also more business oriented topics, and even see if you can actively support team building by getting business talents into those teams, so that there's a knowledge exchange there, the knowledge build up. Fifth success factor is capital. Access to capital, and also help with fundraising strategies. And there's basically those two main roads to capital. One is to get public financing, so provide good information and clustered information. What is there that is available in terms of public funds there, both on a national level or an EU level in our case. And the second is help with the access to private capital. So give access to investor information and databases. Teach and help your startups to actually prove their attractiveness to potential investors. So organize business angel and venture events, and have pitch and demo days, and maybe even think about a platform-based matchmaking between investors and startups and founders. So that there is an ample opportunity to actually get the funds in that one needs. And last but not least is the access to international networks and global hubs. because life science obviously is a truly global business, and you need to be where the science is. So if you have a network there that you can help your startups to use, and maybe even organize joint trips, or if you have partners on the different hubs of life science and of life science incubation, then that's of great help as well. So that, in very few minutes, are the 6 success factors that we think are important for life science incubation, and that's what we are putting into action here in Göttingen in the Life Science Factory. And we're just about to start. We'll start in a few weeks' time in January with our operations there. And our vision here is that we want to promote scientific progress and actually establish Göttingen as a location of choice for life science startups by providing the infrastructure and the platform. And again, I think it's not about just setting up an incubator, building a building, having a great lab. That's one success factor, but you need to provide the environment around it. And that's why we think our purpose is that we want to foster this entrepreneurial spirit with all the different activities that I just mentioned, so that founders and their ideas can grow there. We have a great setting that we're building our life science factory in the newly built Sartorius quarter, right in the heart of Göttingen. And this whole quarter has the motto of learn, launch, live. So that's perfect for where we are. There's a life science cluster there with other companies in the region, and they're active in life sciences. There's a university campus there for health with a health focus. We're in walking distance to the main research institutions, and there's also, I think it's just an attractive area to be and to work. And last but not least, there's also a wine bar available right in the cellar of the tower that you see in the rendering there. So I think good place to be, to work, but also to live and to set things going. Lots of numbers. I'll come to the square meters and how our life science factory looks in detail in a minute. But maybe again to the lower end here. We started nearly 2 years ago with our activities, and I think again that's important because it won't help if you just set up a building. You need to provide and nourish the ecosystem right from the very start. So we've supported over 60 life science startup teams already in and around Göttingen. We've built up a network of over 70 speakers and experts that we can access and that actually mentor the startup teams that we work with. We've done over 60 events already with over 2,000 visitors, both online and offline, to network, to bring in information, to educate, and to seed, if you like, this entrepreneurial spirit. So the Life Science Factory as a life science hub, we're just about to open, as I said, in a few weeks' time. So the top 2 floors on our building are 1,300 square meters of wet lab. I'll come to that in a minute, and I understand, Alex, you will also share a few history bits of how we came into that and how this was designed, the thought process behind it. We have a co-working area. And that is also a very interactive area for our tenants to share ideas. And the big thing is the event space, where you can actually have smaller and larger events, where you can put a frame for this networking and for this exchange and for getting people in and ideas in and let them flow. And we have a prototyping and makers factory on the ground floor with 3D printers and laser cutters and mills, where you can actually develop and do your prototypes. If you're in medtech, do a bit more, maybe design your products so that you can be creative and do what you want to do there. Just a quick view on what was the setup that we have. This is the ground floor, so you would enter from here, and after the reception counter, basically a big foyer which opens into big event space. You can very flexibly build walls in there if you need smaller rooms there, but in general it's an open space, and if there isn't an event, there's lounge areas and a nice place to be. Simply, there's a cafe area and a great stair seating. And then on the left-hand side here, we have the Makers Factory with all the 3D printers and laser cutters. And as I said before, we can do workshops or just build your stuff that you want. You can get training on the equipment. And if you go into the first floor, this is the co-working area. So again, this is the open air basically above the foyer. And then when you enter, you see the different co-working areas, flexible workspaces, conference rooms. You can have private offices, code rack here. And that's actually quite a particular thing as well, because this is the central code rack area. If you like, Germany is not always as warm as other places. So everyone also working in the labs needs to pass through here to get rid of their winter coats and stuff. So this is one central communication area together with the kitchenette, and where you get your food and your drinks, because that's something we want to foster in the life science factories: exchange between the different startups, exchange of ideas. And that's also what the Flex Labs here will serve to do. This is basically a synthesis of an office and a lab. You can use that for all kinds of different activities. So it's a fully equipped lab, but you can do workshops there. You can do hackathons. You can demonstrate stuff. You can do demos. So it's a very flexible, multi-purpose room for any activities and any exchange that you want to create. And then the top two floors, second and third floor, are the wet labs. You see at every point where you see a pink dot, that is a lab bench that you can rent, and you can rent that basically by months. And maybe if you're growing, rent a second or a third or fourth, and just get growing. With every bench that you rent, you have the right to access the functional labs that are in the middle here: bacterial labs, cell cultures, protein and PCR areas, laminar flows. We provide full autoclavation and cleaning service, so you don't need to worry about your rubbish and about the rest. There you can fully concentrate on working. Just book your slot in the labs, or book your slot with certain machinery and equipment that we offer, and then you're ready to go. So quite flexible again, and few weeks to go. If we just have a quick look at the construction site from the outside, you can already see on the left, nearly ready. And on the inside, there's still some work ongoing, but I'm very confident that we'll be able to open as planned, with the first tenants moving in on January 3rd, and the official opening then on January 17th. So just a few weeks to go. One thing you can see here is the very flexible grid in on the top, so that you can, wherever you are, you get all the media, all the power, all the gases that you need, wherever you want to put up your lab or rent your lab bench. And also, if you want more privacy, we can easily set up walls so that you have your private lab in a certain area if you need some protection there, for example. So very quick overview. I'm happy to take any questions later on, or if not, just shoot me an email, and happy to take it from there. Alex, thank you. Back to you.
Jan, thanks a lot for all the fantastic insights, and we are all looking forward to January when the big opening is. So I think we will meet us there. And now I will hand it over to Jérôme. Jérôme, perhaps you can introduce yourself and you can start.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. And first of all, thank you very much, Jan, for this wonderful insight to the Life Science Factory in Göttingen. We need many, many more places like this. Really, all over the place. And I want to share in my quick talk why we need that and how startups in the life science world are actually working, what kind of types they are, what journey they have ahead of, and why is it so important to have these incubators. So that is what my talk is about. My name is Jerome Lutz. I'm the founder of the Smart Lab Architects, and I've been around the startup world for, well, meanwhile, about 20 years. And the last 5 I've spent all around the biotech and life science world, and happy to share a few thoughts on this. Startups are the innovation engine, the place that will create our future. If you look back 20 years ago, and if you look at the industry landscape today, there's so many huge companies that started out as a startup and today are really shaping the way we live. And the same is going to happen in the life science world. I mean, BioNTech just saved the world basically, and they used to be a startup 15 years ago as well. But looking at the topics that are being funded and invested to at the moment, we can expect a huge amount of startups coming up in the life science area in the next years. So looking back a bit, the startup decades. When I was in school, 1995, 2000, there were hardly any startups. Only in 2000 with the dot-com boom, and after that, a lot of software startups came up, and they're shaping our world today. So all you needed for a software startup was a laptop, time and skills, and you were able to build your first prototype. Then you can quickly launch your first beta, figure out if the market actually needs your product. About 10 years later, a lot of hardware startups came up. Startups creating sensors and IoT and all of that kind of stuff. And I've been working with a lot of those, and most of them, all they need is a makerspace, so access to machinery, and a budget, anything between 1 to 10,000 euros to create their first prototypes. And then they were ready to enter market. This first prototype is actually extremely important for all of the startups, because with that one, they can prove that their idea is working. And with wetware startups, they can't even get to that stage because they often don't have any lab access. I'll jump into that a little bit later on. But only in a laboratory, they can create some working science. Often they need a $500,000 budget just in consumables and machinery and all of that kind of stuff to get to this first prototype stage. And then, of course, they will often face the regulators, and if that works out, they can raise huge amounts of budget. That's happening for luckily. So in this area, it's quite working well. And then many years down the line, they are able to launch their products. So we are entering finally the wetware biotech or life science biotech area, and a decade, and I'm really excited to see where that's heading. Looking at the general startup journey, startups often meet in incubators. That's where people get together and they're like, oh, I have this idea and you have this idea. And then suddenly they become co-founders because they have the same ideas in mind. And then when they know what they're doing, they go into accelerators, which make them investor ready or sort of figure out any different aspects of the startup, and then can attract venture capital. In startups of the internet industry, that's about like half a year. Hardware takes like 2-3 years. And biotech, well, it can take up to a decade to get like out of this early phase. It's also a very dangerous phase for startups because they go through the so-called valley of death, the moment where they run out of money and can't fund what they're doing anymore. Because only when they become break even, it becomes an interesting business model for venture capitalists to invest. So incubators and accelerators, and especially incubators, play a huge role in generating startups. And my life, I've dedicated that to startups. When I was 14, 15, I had my first ideas and tried out things. And that turned out to be the red line throughout my life. And I've been looking at and working in companies all along this journey. And the biggest one is Delivery Hero. I was there when we were like 80 people. A year later, we were 800. Now it's anything about 25,000 people. So a huge success. It was extremely fast growing, but I was missing the technology. So that brought me back to the earlier stages. And in the last couple of years, I've been really focusing on the incubator side of things. At Unternehmertum, I was starting X, where we combined synthetic biology, robotics, and AI, and we fostered a community that brings these people together in order to create startups. I've witnessed a lot of startups in the early days. Many of them succeeded, and of course, many didn't. And that is important because the people that you once infect with this idea, hey, you can actually start something yourself, they will come back and they will try again. And I've seen over this long journey, people in all different stages, in one time they'll find something that will change the world. So seeing that this was happening in the makerspace and machine and hardware startups were being produced so easily because you just give them access. We came to the point, and that's how we also reached out to Waldner, to create a biolab that was open to people that have the ideas and can try out things. So we created 3 years ago the Bio Kitchen, and ever since there were startups in it, and now actually it's the time when those teams are getting out and creating a proper company, because this long early research phase is quite crucial for startups, especially in our field. So my journey went on to create the Smart Lab Architects. You see here a couple of pictures of the Bio Kitchen. That was so much fun. And these laboratories are wonderful, highly complex and important places to create. And we need many more of them. So the Smart Lab Architects build, digitalize and automate labs for startups. And you see here as well, one of the laboratories that we recently created, the connectivity space in Berlin, where a lot of startups in Waldner came together to create a space where we can connect our solutions and truly create digital and automated laboratories. On this journey, I've been meeting a lot of different founders with different backgrounds, and I wanted to share with you the categories, how I structure them and how you have to look at these founders. So there's the individual founders, people that have an idea, they might have a team, but they need to first figure out what they're doing. So they either come from had that classic shower thought and so on, and they're jumping into the adventure and trying it out. Then, especially common in the life science, are university spin-offs. Scientists have an idea, they spend their PhD, their postdoc, and many years working on this research, and then there comes the point where the research is mature enough to be turned into a startup and to create a company. And then finally, there's also the serial entrepreneurs in our industry that raise multi-million seed rounds and can hire the best scientists. Actually, I'm working with 2 of them at the moment. So they started their company this year and they raised 6 million seed and the other one 50 million seed, because they have a great concept and the investors are trusting them that they can make it happen. And what's especially important about all of these teams is they need to have a place to work. So imagine you have all of that money available, but you need at least a year and $1 million and more to create a laboratory before you can actually start working on what you want to do. And same is true for the university spin-offs. They cannot start a company because in the moment they do, they have to leave university. In Germany, we cannot, universities cannot support private entities. And then they don't start the company. There's actually quite a lot of teams hung up in this endless loop of funding and governmental funding and grants and prize money, but they don't create a startup, so they don't get customers. So they can't really get to start to work because they need to stick to the lab that they have. And same for individual founders, it's hardly impossible to create a biotech startups just on your own without incubators. So, because here, that's where specialized life science incubators come in, they can offer space to all these 3 types of startups. And I would recommend that actually these people get together because they can learn from each other. The university spin-offs can learn from the serial entrepreneurs how to quickly scale a life science tech. The serial entrepreneurs can work with the great researchers and get interesting scientific insights. And then everybody needs some business founders and other specialties in their team. So if you're also open to individual founders, you might get this important mixture in your community just by creating a life science incubator that gives access to the funds and support with all of the things that Jan has been presenting before. So why now? And why now? I think really it's now the time that the life science startups are ready. So we have, sorry for my neighbors, there's a construction site starting right now, sorry. Why now? Because the science and the technologies are now ready. They are affordable, they're getting more affordable, and you can now create breakthrough technologies. The venture capital market, which I'm showing you here, is also ready to invest in this high risky field. And over the last year, there have been so many investment rounds in our industry as there have never been before. So the money is there to support these ideas. We actually need to enable many, many more startups to be created. And that is why we need these incubators, as it is the place where you start this. You need to get more people from all different industries involved to solve all these things. And let me talk about the how we can create these incubators, and what I think will be an important setup from the things that I've learned in the past and from the incubators that I've been working in. So I think we need specialized incubators, especially in life science. You have all sorts of different startups and they all need a different equipment. And it is really expensive to get this equipment together. And often startups need to acquire this equipment in the early phases. But you don't need to have an autoclave for every one, for example. So a lot of standardized equipment should be in place in these incubators. And that one should be targeted to a certain group. Because, for example, let's take these precision fermentation startups. They need all sorts of bioreactors, all different sizes, and these machines cost anything between 100 to 500,000 euros. And imagining that we would have a facility where you can go in and start using this equipment, that will be a tremendous boost for these kind of startups. So I'll be recommending that there's like a fermentation incubator here, a pharma incubator there, a agriculture incubator on another place, and in Berlin actually there's another one starting that is specializing on food startups, because by specializing you can actually attract the crowd from all over places to come to your incubator because you have a specialized offer. So I could well imagine the next couple of years startups from all over Europe are coming to Göttingen to work on their infrastructure, and others are coming to Berlin, and we need to kind of connect these communities. Another thing that I think is really important to mention in this incubator space is that if you run an incubator on a for-profit basis, that will be a pretty hard business model to run. I'm glad that, for example, the Unternehmertum, but also the Life Science Factory, they are not for profit in the sense that they cannot, well, startups in the early days, they don't have much money either. So they are supporting the ecosystem. What could work is, for example, if you then invest in these startups and profit from the long run. And that's actually a model that has been working very well in the internet world as well. For example, if you look at Y Combinator, a very famous US-based incubator, where pretty much, if you look at the portfolio, all large companies that exist today went through. They invest a standard amount, I think it was 150K, 125,000 euros or so, and take about 7% of the company. It's a standard deal. That was also what Jan was talking about. And it's a simple deal. You sign a standard contract, off you go, and you support the startup that's sitting in your incubator. So these kind of offerings really help speed up the development of startups, and will then create and let the founders focus really on the science and on the products that they want to create. So yeah, I really hope that many more of these incubators are happening all over Germany, all over Europe, And it would be a pleasure to support any of those, bringing in startups, bringing in technologies from the startups, because there's also a very interesting laboratory technology startup scene here in Germany that specializes on all sorts of clever IoT solutions, for example, in the laboratory. And merging all of these startup worlds would be a great pleasure. And yeah, it would be great if we stay in contact. Feel free to reach out if you have any further questions. Write in the chat if you would like to learn anything more about the startups, or if you want to stay in contact, just visit my LinkedIn or our website, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much, and back to Alex. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jerome, and thanks a lot for all the informations and insights, especially from the perspective of the startups and all the different kind of startups and so on. I'm really impressed. Thanks a lot, Jerome.
Thank you.
So now we come to our third impulse. I will share my screen. So the question is, how can we start into an unknown future? Because with a startup company, we never know the startups, which kind of startups, what technology do they need? Are they starting with one person, or is it a group of 3 persons and so on? So we know normally nothing, and also the building is changing in the next 2, 3, 5 years. There are coming new startups, they are going the startups and so on. So the question is, how can we develop such a building, such a space? And there are many topics we think about, we talk about. At the very first beginning, always we need a wow effect, because we want to be attractive for the startups, of course. We need inspiration there. We need a flexible infrastructure. Jan already told us that this is really important for the building. We need much of collaboration and creativity. We need full service for the startups. And we also should share the equipment, high-end equipment. It's really expensive. And yeah, we need a good shared concept. And at the very first beginning with the Life Science Factory in Göttingen, we started with the ideation workshops on site. It was before Corona started. It was, I think, in 2018. We started in Göttingen. And a very important thing is that we have the different perspectives in this ideation process. There were the manager, there were also potential startups, there were facility people, there were architects and so on. And we have an open-minded workshop atmosphere, and we thought about, okay, what can we make there? What is our vision? And you see a photo from 2018 here, and we made that with several workshops to create a good vision. And then we defined the topics, and you see here different topics which were very important for Sartorius. For example, when we go from up to down, central service, full service for the startups. We want to have perhaps a flag step, but the born of a flag step was born inside the workshops. So it's a multi-space for co-worker and also for office things. A makerspace to prototype very quickly some things. Jerome also told us about the makerspace. Co-working, private labs, and rental benches. So when you start with a one-man show, you take a rental, you rent a bench, and perhaps if you grow and you have 2 or 3 people, you need a private lab. So you need some separate walls or something to have your own space. And this was the room program. And the question was, how can we bring this program in the building on the different levels? And then we made some zoning concepts. That means on the left side here, you see, for example, variant 1. This is the typical zoning concept for normal labs. So with blue color, you see the lab, and with green color, you see the write-ups directly to the lab, so that the distance is very close. You're working in the lab and you go out to the write-up and you're very fast. But the problem here is that everybody has his own suite. With separation walls and so on, and there is no communication between the startups. And so we thought about, okay, a next possibility could be we create a co-working marketplace in the middle of each level, and on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side we have the laboratory spaces. So the distance is not so far away from the lab to the co-working space, and you meet all the other startups here to collaborate and communicate. And that would be a possible space concept, but Sartorius also said that's not enough for us. For us, not the distance, and the distance between lab and office is the most important thing. The most important thing for this building, for our life science incubator, is communication and collaboration. So we decided, or Sartorius decided, no, we want the collaboration area, the marketplace, the co-working on one level here in the first level, and everybody who is in the laboratories in the second or in the third level, they have to come to this level number 1 to make office work, to communicate, to collaborate. So everybody has to meet here. And this is really great for collaboration and communication. The distance is, yes, there is a distance, but the most important thing is collaboration. And I think that's a really cool concept. And here you also see in the basement, you have the social area in orange and the makerspace and the wooden surface. Then a really special thing here in pink, this is the flag step, and here on level 2 and on level 3, we have the laboratories. And in the next picture, I show you the 3D building model. So you see again in the ground floor, there's much social. There are flex walls to separate the big area into small sections, for example, for training, for demos, for a conference, for what else. You have a kitchenette here, and you have cool seating stairs. I think that will be a great atmosphere at the ground floor. And you see again here the makerspace, and we also thought about what do we need in the makerspace: machines, 3D printers, what materials should we offer there, metal, plastics, and so on. And here is the co-working space, and the flag step is a really special thing, because we thought about when the people come to the entrance, there's an atrium, and when they look to the ceiling, they should feel and see laboratories, and this is really important. So we introduced there a flex lab. We have a ceiling system, and we can use it as a conference room or as a laboratory for demos, for hackathon, and so on. And here you see the laboratory levels on level 2 and on level 3. The dark blue is the shared equipment and the service things. So here you can see the whole building concept. Here, Jan already showed that to you. This is the zoning, the pink points. These are the potential rental benches. And in the middle, you have the shared equipment, you have the special rooms, and so on. And important, or the lesson learns from Sartorius, but also from other incubators and accelerators projects, is these are the key modules or the key space modules of such a building. We have a lab space, an open lab, or private labs, or really flexible walls to separate areas and rooms. You have co-working space, you have a multi-space or a flex lab which you can use as a conference or with a demo lab. You have a maker space. Collaboration is really, really important for startups. And you have, for example, learning space or training rooms, and social space is also very, very important. So now I will hand over to Maximilian English and to Neith Madden, and they will talk about the new life science incubator in Singapore.
Very good. Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. It's a good and very well-timed seminar about incubators and accelerators, because it's quite a hot topic around the world, especially in America. We see this in every major city as a for-profit or non-for-profit setup, and there's a few around the rest of the world. Jerome, as you mentioned, Germany is quite a hotspot, but also France is picking up speed. The UK has had those incubators for many years, and across Asia we see those too. LSI in Singapore is a good example of an incubator, and I guess you all heard a few reasons why it's so important to have those. If you think of those startups in pre-seed or seed stage, they don't know when they get the money, how much money they will get. Will they be successful as they move along? And that also poses challenges to the facility, obviously. But those incubators are also a great space for existing companies. I'm speaking big pharma, big life science, big biotech firms, because obviously they have the money and the cash to I guess generate more business, but often they lack ideas and the access to the graduates. So it's a good place to cross-pollinate, where the existing companies meet and young startups meet together. And also it can be a great space for larger companies to reduce their capex spendings, right? Because you can just flexibly take or lease some space in an incubator and scale up or down as you need before you build your own. Or in some areas, it might be your first step in a country before you set up your legal entities, and then follow suit with your major operations. So as an ecosystem, as I guess coined the phrase, it's quite a nice space that brings different categories of this industry together. It brings together the startup companies, but also the providers of equipment, right? So it can be a great space for many of the industry providers of different lab equipment and consumables and all those things that provide scientists with the latest technology as a test bed with young startups. This equipment is often shared. They get really on the ground information back from those. So that's very interesting for them. Obviously for the VCs, the venture capitalist networks, it's quite important because that's where they meet potential investees and future unicorns potentially. And yes, of course, it is a flexible space. So it's unforeseeable where those startups develop and how those startups develop. And the same we had with LSI in Singapore when we planned and designed the space. There was nothing. There was no startup to move in, but it was basically the, like you mentioned earlier, you need to be where the science is, and Singapore is a great space for that, a great place with great universities, with a good biotech startup scene that has been developed in the last decades. And then you see why the space makes so much sense and why it was built like it was built. Because as I mentioned now, I think twice already, that it was built without having tenants in mind. Yes, you canvas the market and yes, you canvas the space, but you don't really know who's going to come. Clear was, though, there was a demand for privately run incubation space because Rio mentioned earlier, universities only can accept so much startups every year. Every year, a new cohort comes up and the top ones they either leave or they have to start within the university and very often give equity away. So there's quite a demand for places where you don't have to do that. You keep your equity and just pay a rent, basically. And this is where the Life Science Incubator in Singapore has its space. On the left-hand side, the blue area is the lab area, and the green area is the co-working office area in the German Center in Singapore. And it's basically a mix of open lab, which you will see on the layout on the following page. It's an open lab as well as private suites. Obviously, setting up those incubators or accelerators, it also depends what stage companies you attract. Is it a pre-seed company? They might be happy to just have a desk in a lab. Is it more the accelerator companies? Then they would want a better IP protection. They would want their own suites and a segregation rather than a mixing with other tenants where they can learn, right? So it depends a bit on where you go. But here, as you can see, it's a bit smaller than the Life Science Factory in Göttingen, but with a similar concept. On the left-hand side, all the way, it's an open lab with individual desks that can be rearranged, because obviously, as the startups grow, there might be different arrangements inside the facility. So everything has to be flexibly designed, both the on-the-ground facilities as well as the infrastructure and the ceiling. Then we have some private lab suites of different sizes, and then there's a shared equipment area consisting of the cryo storage. There is -80 freezers, -40s. There's a pilot plant. There's an autoclaving room, microscopy, as well as tissue culture. So this is the shared equipment that you can book. There's a few cool startups around that too that think about why does everybody have to own their own equipment if you just need a certain, like a microscope, twice a day, for example, then you don't need to buy it. You can just rent it, so or book it as you go, a bit like a gym. And I guess that's what LSI does in Singapore. And Neve, I think in a second you'll speak about it in a bit more detail. But so far in the 7 weeks that it has been officially open, there's already been a few tenants that moved in into the lab, but also the office space. So quite a cool success story. And Neve, over to you with a bit more details, and then also I think a video and a walkthrough of the space.
Yes, good evening from the equator here in Singapore, and so everyone back in Europe, hello. I think Max has given a lovely introduction to LSI Life Science Incubator here in Singapore. Similar to the concepts over in Germany and elsewhere in the world, this part of Asia is definitely dying for this type of facility. So what I've done today is I have just recorded a quick video. So walking through the space here, you'll see that we have a number of different facilities. When you arrive on site at the lab, peeking in here, you'll see our operating theatre. So we've integrated a demo OT space. So for companies working in the devices and diagnostic space, that they are catered for within our life science incubator. And so as Max had mentioned, we didn't know exactly who the companies would be from day one, but we had heard from the ground that companies in the devices space would be looking for demonstration, validation and training space. Walking on down through then and taking a peek into the next section of the lab, we meet the junction where most of our lab users make their daily commute. Looking down this corridor, we see that there is, on the right-hand side, lots of storage for companies in the startup space. Storage is key. Here on the support corridor, on the left and on the right, you'll see a number of doors. Inside each one of these doors on the left house various different technologies. So companies are accessing fridges and freezers, cryo storage or ice machines, and things that they may not want to invest in because they simply need 1 or 2 shelves. So going back to that flexibility and agility to tap on. We also have a bioprocessing or fermentation space. So pointing on to Jerome's mention earlier for that growth in fermentation in the bioprocessing community, that is very prevalent here in Singapore. We also have autoclaving, similar to the lab back in Germany here, so that companies can autoclave and sterilize anything from their tips right through to their bioprocessing vessels, taking away that pain point for startups. Here we see that we've got some microscopes, again, communal technologies, investments of heavy pieces like a microscope may be very challenging for a startup, coming out of university or a self-fund. So having these on site is really crucial for us. Within LSI, we've seen a huge uptake from mammalian cell culture, a lot of alternative protein companies. So we've got a dedicated BSc room, and we also have a bacterial BSc room so that we can segregate. I think that's one of the things about a co-working space, is making sure that you create an ecosystem that's equal to all, and you create kind of the barriers so that people don't have unnecessary conflict. As well as these service support rooms, I'm taking a peek in here, if it ever lets me in, into one of our private suites. So this is a 12-meter squared private suite. So typically you would see a team of maybe 4 to 5 packs occupying this space. It comes pre-commissioned with our lovely Waldner furniture, as well as the beams that have the phase 1 power, your gas outlets. This is a perfect blank canvas for a company that are looking to set up their own facility, their own lab, and they do so by tapping onto our resources, and they can do so in a very quick and efficient manner. Heading back on down to the main hallway that we saw earlier, here we've got our, safety and security. Health and safety is paramount, and we provide that as a co-working space. Our emergency shower, water stations, type 1 and type 2, etc. And as we move down here, you'll see we've got storage also for things like hazardous or flammable substances. Applying for licenses is all part and parcel of what LSI has done on behalf of our member companies. Here's the pièce de résistance, I suppose, the kind of heartbeat of Life Science Incubator being that open lab that you would have seen in the blue part of the diagram. We have 48 benches, each of them are rentable by company members, apart from those that are occupied by communal technologies. So we're delighted to be working with some phenomenal German companies, primarily in the technology sphere. So companies like EMC Lab, like Lauda, like Serva, many companies that you guys will know back in Germany, right through to big brands like Eppendorf and Biorad that are physically present here in Singapore. So this is a wonderful space for companies to begin by taking one individual bench and starting out their journey with us, but then eventually, hopefully, growing and pivoting into one of the private suites that we had a peek into earlier. Just a quick look at some of the more complex machinery and technology, everything right up to flow cytometry, which can be, very hard to come by and very expensive to procure. Heading back around, and we've got some lovely views in the German centre here. It's an unusual thing to experience greenery views outside a lab. But we too have integrated a kitchenette space, kind of a breakout concept kitchen space, so that you can grab a cup of coffee, have some lunch, or maybe meet with your VCs or your partners or your distributors. Finally, then bringing you into the last room, which is our maker space. An event, collaboration, integration and training space, perfect for companies that need something that's maybe not your typical meeting room. Here we see companies like Plasma Treat, which is one of our member companies, doing their in-house calibration, training, validation, bringing teams back and forth from Germany to do that in-house, because they've got the access through our Waldner Fly One arms with gas and power. And at this point here, I'll stop sharing my screen. So yeah, I suppose we did really want, and we worked very closely with Waldner, an agnostic, a very open space where companies could grow and evolve, but we could also be agile and be very proactive and reactive to the types of companies we were seeing popping up across the Singaporean ecosystem. So I'm conscious of time. I know we've just hit 8:01. So thank you very much for the time, and I welcome any questions for LSI.
So thanks a lot, Ni, for the live tour, for the walk through the laboratories. That's really cool. So I looked to the chat, and here's one question, I think, for you. What was particularly important in designing the life science incubator in Singapore? And are there already first interested parties?
I think to answer question number one was definitely to have a sense of flexibility, but also potential for growth. We see here in Singapore companies growing at a very rapid rate. So the turnover of companies through labs is very high. We wanted to have maybe a graduation track. So from individual bench, we then see teams looking towards one of the smaller private suites and then the double private suite. So there is that kind of trajectory or graduation process. So I think that was really important. As well as, I think for us, something that makes us stand out is that we collaborate really closely with some of the leading partners in technology, services and equipment. And that's something that is very unique, I think, to us here in Singapore, but also globally. Bringing multinationals and very small new players into a dialogue is something we actively encourage. And yes, and question number 2, we're thrilled to say we've had really strong feedback. We have 6 member companies already in situ, and I'm hoping by the time Christmas comes around, that will be about 9 or 10 companies. So testament to the appetite that's here in market. We're working with companies that range from those working on female fertility assays right through to alternative protein and lab cultured meat. So a really wide variety, and we're really excited to see who else is coming down the tracks.
Oh, thanks a lot, Neve. And here's another question, I think, for Jan Borkowski. So, Jan, is the life science concept specific to Göttingen, or is it a blueprint for other locations?
Oh, that's a good question, Alex. I would say in general, I think those success factors that we found, I think they're generally applicable to everywhere. How you do it specifically, I think, might vary from place to place. So I think we found a good solution for the Göttingen ecosystem and partnering with the institutions that we have here. And it might look a bit different if you do it in another place. But I think key aspects of how we set up the life science factory, and I think what we've just seen from Neve echoes that a bit, is key aspects is flexibility, is room to grow, to expand. And in that sense, I would say, yes, that's a concept that's generally applicable. I think what also is generally applicable is don't just build a lab, foster the ecosystem, set up the whole set, and then it works. And how that looks might be different from place to place, but the general outlook, I would say, yes, is probably a general one.
Okay, thanks. And there is another question also for you, Jan. If different startups work in the same lab and also share the same equipment, how do you deal with conflicts?
That's a good question. I can only answer that theoretically, yes, because I hope we don't get into that position so that we don't have any conflicts, but the great harmony between everyone involved. However, should there ever be one, I think all the potential conflicts that we could envision is when startups want to collaborate, but then also say, oh, this is a certain IP I don't want to share, or this is a topic that's unique to me, and how do I do that? So one obviously is that we have NDAs in place. When you come into the life science factory, you sign your NDA, and so basically that is a bit of a closed shop or Chatham House rules, if you like. And then also I think it's a bit a question of rules. You have the lab management and order, however, and rules prevent conflict in general. But we also want to foster this collaboration and establish a spirit of collaboration. And that's a bit of a culture. And I think that will be indeed interesting to see. Maybe we need to talk in half a year's time about that. Does it work how we want to, that you have a base of rules, but basically that the culture is that of collaboration, and then that kind of prevents a conflict that comes around. So yeah, to answer your question, Jenna, I hope that we have a set of rules and a set of authorities in place to deal with conflicts, but I also hope that the culture that we establish prevents conflicts from the start. But maybe, Neve, I don't know about what experience you've made in your first weeks in Singapore already with that question.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think setting out parameters and processes have, I think, solved a few headaches for us. Things like separation of activities and outlining what the process is, how you find the equipment is how you leave the equipment. I think that for us is definitely, We spent a lot of time and effort on that, and it has served us well thus far. Again, so maybe we need to have a private WhatsApp chat so that we can tic-tac back and forth for any issues we do see arising. But touch wood, nothing major so far.
Thanks a lot, Neve. And there's another question, and I think this is the perfect question for both of you. And it's about, what are the conditions for startups in the life science incubator? Is there an investment or a rent?
So for us in Life Science Incubation, we are a privately held company, and we do not, require any equity or IP to be transferred. We are very transactional in a sense, because we see companies often being a little bit reluctant to engage in a space that they have to. We want to give that choice. So for us, it's a rental. Like Max mentioned, it's kind of like a gym membership. You come in, you take whatever amount of space you like, and you tap onto the resources. So that's our structure.
Yeah, pretty similar to us. As you've seen, we are founded by Sartorius, but there's no strings, however, to Sartorius on that. So it's a pure gym membership rental model. You rent a bench, you rent equipment usage time, and you scale that up and down. There's no need, or actually no possibility to do any share deals with us. It's really is on a monthly basis. You rent a lab bench or whatever else you need, and you scale that up and down. Maybe one further condition is that, as we see ourselves as an incubator, we would not want to have our hosts for too long. Let's put it that way. So our aim is that our tenants are with us maybe 2 years, maybe a bit more. But after that time, we hope and expect them to have been able to grow, to show that their idea works, to develop their network with our help, obviously, and then we can help them to move on to the next stage and basically rent their own big lab, if you like, and move on, so that we'll have a constant flow of new startups coming in and of startups graduating and taking the next step in their corporate journey.
Okay, thanks. There's another question, perhaps for you, Jerome. The question is, when designing an incubator, what should you focus on? By founder type, by application, or what?
I think it starts a lot with the ecosystem again. So what kind of ecosystems do you have in place and where you want to create it? So looking at it from a Munich perspective, for example, we have in Martinsried a very strong pharma cluster, in Weinstefan much more agriculture, and in Garching and Freising, in another place, a lot of industrial biotech. So if you're going to a place, you need to know what kind of startups are there, and have a look at this from the technology part. So what equipment will you provide there? Because especially in Germany, there's plenty of really highly scientific clusters all over Germany. So I think pretty much every one of those needs a place like that. And from a founder type, I would encourage to get a much diverse crew, like really try to get companies and startups from all stages, from individual founders, like host events for people that are interested in creating a startup, but I have no clue what they want to do there, until the serial, and make an interesting offer as well to serial entrepreneurs, because those are the ones that are much more likely to create a very successful startups because they've done it in the past. And the whole ecosystem in Incubator, I think, can benefit a lot when such tenants come in and bring the valuable experience. They know exactly what machines, what protocols to run, what to do, and also how to run a company, because this is, especially in our field, a very rare trait. We might have fantastic science, but hardly any entrepreneurs. So I'd really recommend that you try to get as much as diverse crowd in there as possible, and also connect and share the crowds between the incubators. I've seen many startups do so-called incubator hopping, and the first couple of years leaving their apartment, renting it out, and just traveling the world to work in all sorts of incubators, depending on the stage of their company. Might be a bit more harder for life science startups, as they might have to move quite a bit of stuff. but I would highly encourage to get that network up and running.
So is there a list of life science incubators? Do you know something about that?
I wish I had one. I'd probably need to create one. I haven't found any of those. I'll definitely put you guys on the list. But there's, I don't know, maybe 5, 6 of them coming up or so. But we should actually get a list like that together. There's big ones like IndieBio in the US, or the bio labs in the US as well, which are like much more like a labs sharing space. And whereas IndieBio is a much more fully integrated VC, incubator, accelerator, anything. So I haven't found one. I've been looking for it. So if anybody has one, please share, and let's get one together.
Okay, and here is another question for you, Jérôme. What is a typical daily routine for founders, and what is the special attraction for potential founders? For in such a building, what is the attraction for them to go in such a building?
First of all, the exchange, I think, amongst people. So you need, back in the days, you needed an office. Today, well, we don't need offices anymore, but it would be awesome to work close by with other founders. So that's a big plus if you have a great community there. And then, especially in life science, it's just about the access to the machinery and being able to work with high quality equipment, because that will give you better results. But at the same time, also you need to learn a lot about the equipment, I guess, especially if you're tackling new problems and you haven't had 10 years of PhD and postdoc experience. You need to learn a lot about the machinery. So if a place like that would provide this learning both on the scientific level, but also on the entrepreneurial level, I think that will be a really important argument for any life science startup going to be founder to join such a place.
Okay, and there is another question. How do you deal with infrastructure like freezers? How do startups protect their biological samples? Are these shared? Perhaps you share, Jérôme, or another, or Jan, or Niamh?
I have an idea of how we could do it. So if you haven't solved it, let me know.
Yeah, maybe I can quickly give an idea of how we are planning to do. So you have different freezing capacities, both individual, that you basically have your own freezer, but also that you have a place in a bigger freezer. So how do you protect the samples then? One is through the rules that we adjust. So basically, it's fair play between each other, and also through the booking software that we use. We know who accessed the freezers or the fridges. So if there should be any issues, you could see who has done it, and obviously the idea is that actually prevents people from messing with other people's samples.
Okay, and here's another question. It looks like nice to have a lot of free space in a lab to communicate, but what about companies' secrets during the development phase where a patent is not born?
I think
Niamh, please.
Yeah, I think that rings true to what you already mentioned, Jan, on NDAs. And I think a really good example for LSI is that we have 5 companies working in the food technology or alternative protein space. So from an outward-looking lens, you may say, gosh, that's a very competitive area to be in. But they've been very clever about how they've engaged with NDAs. And in fact, they're working really collaboratively because they each feed a need of another company. So, of course, there are certain things when you come to a co-working space, we cannot, rule with an iron fist that you can't say things out of order. But we actively encourage people to take precautions that they can themselves, but also to keep an open mind so that they can collaborate. For us, we're quite lucky. The private suites allow companies who are very concerned with security and privacy to rent that space. so they can take that extra step. But by and large, for the smaller companies, I think they're so open and willing to learn that an open lab space is sufficient when they take due diligence.
Thanks. And here's another question. How are the labs supplied? What is the waste concept?
I can go first.
So go ahead.
For waste, I'm going backwards first. So for waste, we engage a vendor here in Singapore. So all of our hazardous as well as our general waste is collected as like every other. And we do a lot of our own autoclaving of biological liquid waste. So we do that mostly in-house, other than the vendors that remove. And then consolidation of orders is something that we found to be very beneficial. It is a little bit of extra administration for us at an LSI side, but it really eases some pain points or some tensions for companies who are concerned with potentially credit terms or lead times or meeting minimum order quantities. So we engage with, here in Singapore, A-STAR's Research Support Centre, as well as some of our platinum partners like Merck Sigma Altrich, where we've actually leveraged really good discounts for the startups. So not only do we make their life easier, we make their life cheaper, which is always a plus. So that is for us how we manage that. Again, I think it's important to give the startups the opportunity, but the chance to say, well, actually, no, I prefer to purchase elsewhere. So we don't make it obligatory that they purchase through us, but if they do, they can.
So similar story here in Göttingen, how we've organized both the waste and the supply of material. Also, we are using vending machines, so we try to have as much as possible through vending machines, so that so basically each startup can use as they need stuff, and we'll have access also a discounted access to a web shop for everything that doesn't fit into a vending machine, if you like.
Nice.
Okay, and here's in the chat for Jerome, Sarah wrote, I agree with Jerome that we need more life science, but also natural science incubators with lab access. However, labs are expensive to build and or to renovate. Where do you envision the money coming from? Jerome, perhaps you can say something to that?
Sure, it's a very, very tricky question. Labs are tremendously expensive to build, and I think many of us know that. The thing is, there's different options. So what I've seen recently, and I really encourage, is universities establishing also these sort of incubators and giving access to their laboratories in a much more open and flexible way as they used to, like if you work with a professor, for example. So this is moving on and happening. So there's already existing infrastructure, and of course still money needs to be invested. But as a university translating its science, there's ways how you can fund these kind of places. In your examples here, you are running this as a company, and of course that you would take a rent for the space. So you will most likely try to find a way how you can earn enough money to pay for the space. But as I'm saying, what I meant with non-profit is it's going to be really hard to make a profitable and great business model out of that. The thing that might work is, as I said, if you have a long haul and long time frame ahead of you, you could go for investing into the startups. So you would not only invest money, but you would always also invest lab space, basically lab space and consumables into these companies. So more like natural goods, and in return get shares of that startup. That could be a model. It's been working for some industries, and but there you need, of course, to have a very long time span ahead of you until you can realize any gains for that. And besides that, I think, I hope, let's say it like that, there's more and more very successful entrepreneurs that come back to philanthropy and support these kind of places. That has been around as well. And that could be as well a model to run and finance these places.
Okay, the last questions. We have more questions in the chat, but we have to finish. There's one question. What is the difference between incubators and accelerators? Jérôme, do you want to say something about that, or Max, perhaps?
So an incubator is a much more general approach to incubate things, meaning like the very early on, like where people and ideas get together and you try to figure out what you want to do. And that's quite a long time that you need to spend in this phase to truly find a product. And an accelerator comes in place as soon as you have a product, you know what you're doing, and you are, for example, you want to get investor ready. So you go to an incubator that polishes your pitch and makes accelerator, please excuse me, polishes your pitch and makes sure that you become investor ready. And after, say, a 3-month batch, you then present in front of many investors that the accelerator invited, and then they go off to the next batch. So especially in accelerators, you have like batches, 2 or 3 a year. And if you are interested in the offer of them, and there's thousands out there that focus on specific topics like digital health or plug and play or tech founders and so on, you can accelerate and do a certain project with them together. Whereas an incubator is really like the early phase, the fuzzy front end, sometimes the crazy place, but well, that's where it often begins. That's at least from my perspective. But
okay, and Max, perhaps to you, the perspective. What does that mean for a building or for the spaces? Is there a difference, in your opinion, between incubators and accelerators?
Yes, definitely. There's also a difference between incubators themselves, right? It depends who runs them. Is it an incubation program? Is it like the Y Combinator, for example, that you mentioned, or is it somebody who wants to really incubate startups and make them from one scientist, teach them how the business plan is written, teach them, basic stuff of how to do the work? Is it a program or is it just a space? So that's, I guess, the first differentiation. But between an incubator in general and an accelerator, I guess the group size is bigger, right? So what we're doing here in LSI is lot size 1. A lot of your tenants need are also 1 or 2 people, right? As a founder, whereas we're just designing, or we've actually finished the design of an accelerator in Shanghai, which I think will be a topic potentially sometime next year in one of those events. The group size is much bigger. There's much more privacy necessary because they have an IP, they're in the market, they don't want to share, they don't need to share anymore. They have the money to buy their own stuff, some of them, because they're also big enough. They don't grow exponentially anymore in terms of staff size, right? From 1 to 5 to 10, they're already like 15, 20 people. So yes, the infrastructure is a bit different, can be a bit more organized. And yes, the group size in general is bigger. So it has a different aspect on how how to design the space down the lines of what Jérôme said.
Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for all our speaker and the good questions in the chat. We can't answer every question. To know more about that, you can contact us directly per email, and then we can have a call or something. Thanks for everybody joining us. We have the next event on the 1st of December. It's about universities and institutes. If you missed an event, for example, the first event, the Future of Labs, we have it on our website and on YouTube. You can watch that. And at the end, I will show you the last slide. There you have all the next events and also a QR code to our website, so you can register for the next event if you want. Thanks a lot for joining us, and see you next time. Thanks. And all,
thanks, Alex. Thanks, everybody.
Also for the speakers. Thanks a lot.
thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you very much.